During the development of the hammer technology within Menk, Menk put out various different systems. Certainly in the early days, back in 1800, there was a steam-powered system, but steam certainly had its downturns in terms of efficiency. So things developed along the way, and Menk looked into diesel-powered systems and so on, but eventually ended up at the hydraulics being the most efficient system, really, and what I call a closed system at the same time. Enclosed meaning if you compare a steam hammer or diesel hammer to a hydraulic hammer, the steam hammer you still have the exhaust coming out, you have quite a lot of fluids leaving the system. Most of them are being diesel remains or greases. With a hydraulic system you're fully contained, so it's a greener, I would call it, a greener system than compared to a diesel hammer. At the same time, a diesel hammer can also be run as a double-acting hammer. So double-acting meaning you do use hydraulic power to uplift the ram weight, but you also use hydraulic power to accelerate the ram weight. So our system today that we have in the market, and as well as our competitors, they gain 2G accelerations, 1G coming from Earth gravitational forces and 1G coming from the acceleration through hydraulics. One of the initial systems that Menk put out and focused entirely on the offshore market, not subsea at the time, but offshore, was an MRBS system. MRBS standing for Menk Rambeer, pile driver, at the end in German though. Some of these systems, and those were put out in the 1970s. Some of these systems still work in the market today. I'm just working on a project where one of the clients in Venezuela is actually trying to replace those systems with actual systems today. So they're very reliable, rough, hard-wearing systems in the industry. Another system which was introduced to the market is an MHF series of hammers. It's a single-acting hydraulic hammer. MRBS was a steam-powered system still, and with the MHF, Menk took the step forward, fully committing to the hydraulics. MHF, though, is an open system, so what you do see there, you have a drive unit, and you do see the ram weight moving up and down on the outside, which certainly is not valuable or advantageous for underwater applications, though the MHF really, hammer series, really opened the market for Menk to the offshore industry for shallow water jacket installations, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico, but elsewhere as well. Very soon after, Menk said, well, you know what, it might be worthwhile enclosing the entire movable parts of the hammer and actually putting it subsea. So the MHU hammer series, as we still know it today, was born. And this was initially the MHU S series, S standing for shallow water, but soon after an MHUT series of hammers, which is the deep water and ultra deep water hammer system that we do entertain in the market still today, was born and introduced to the market. Essentially the difference between these S and T series is certain sensor packages and outfitting on the hammer that would be put on to make an S hammer to a T hammer. Essentially, the core, though, of the hammer is still the same. So it's a hammer that can work, the MHUS hammer is a hammer that can work above water, shallow water, but ultra deep water, and we drive piles today in 7,300 feet of water depth. To do that, though, efficiently, we had introduced in 1989 an underwater or deep water power pack system. It's an electro-hydraulic power pack that is fed with electric energy from the surface through an umbilical and carries electric engines that in return run hydraulic pump units, and therefore the hydraulic cycle subsea directly on the hammer. So it's a girdle type power pack that sits directly on top of the hammer and can then be used for deep water applications. But all the technology that we use in deep water, as well as shallow water, but also in above water, is really down to the core identical. There's no big difference. This step really, Menk took this step forward and seeing these opportunities as they entered the market with the MHF series of hammers, seeing that there's pile driving activities, but there's also requirements for providing strong foundations in the underwater market, where conventionally gravity-based structures at the time, and slowly some suction piles were introduced, but this was really very early stages of the suction pile technology, most of which were gravity-based. Menk also saw the advantage of introducing this system to the market because the contractors and operators subsequently could lose or minimize the length of pile they have to provide for an offshore installation. The first jackets that were installed were jacket legs, so you had a jacket structure through which the entire pile was fed all the way to the surface. So you had to go all the way through the water column, inside of a leg, of course, but into the soil then. So the pile length that you had within the jacket is lost steel and just cost money. So Menck identified the benefit of having a subsea power pile or subsea hammer to drive a skirt pile. So you could actually shorten the pile significantly and provide cost savings to the industry. And this is one of the biggest motivations at the time to introduce the hammer to the market.